Okay, let's continue. There are only a few of you now, so maybe actually I don't need the microphone. And I was told that it sounds bad, the voice, because I don't have much of an experience holding a microphone, to tell you the truth. Yeah. Let's continue. Unfortunately, the member of the Parliament of North Macedonia, Sanela, because of the busy agenda, she needed to go, she needed to leave. Hopefully we're going to have her in some guest lecture, some other event that we're going to organize and be able to listen to her. Now we're going to continue with the panel. In the end, we're going to have Q&As with the students. Hopefully we're going to have a debate. Now I would like to give a word to our panelist, education specialist in UNICEF, Vera Kondikj Mitkovska.
Thank you so much. I was thinking how to start my speech because we're talking about inclusive education, how this speech should be inclusive for everybody who is here. And I've been struggling because I could see that people are leaving, some people were sleeping, some people were watching their phones, so I was like, what should I say so to keep your attention? And if you're psychology, some of you will see that there are people who, some of you would like to hear facts. Some of you would like to, have process, like what next. Some of you would like to hear about innovation, and some of you would like to hear something that will touch your feelings. So I'll try in my presentation really to give all of this. I'm not promising much, but I'll do my best. So I'm coming from UNICEF, and my invitation to this event was come and talk what UNICEF is doing, what kind of projects UNICEF is implementing. So just to be straight, UNICEF is not really implementing projects. UNICEF is implementing priorities. So we have key priorities in our mandate, and we are supporting the government to implement these priorities. So as part of my speech, I will talk also about something which is boring, and those are usually the legislation, because UNICEF was very much involved in inclusive education, and if you remember, in 2019 when the law on primary education was voted, UNICEF was all over the news, because we were fighting for children with disabilities to be in schools. So when we talk about inclusive education, we usually think about quality education. So education that is appropriate for every child. So each one of you have been, you're right now in education, you've been in education before, and you know that there are things and phases in your life when you face challenges, and school is there to support you with the challenges. So this is what education is about. It's not only to have academic achievements, but also to provide you with social and emotional well-being, for you to socialize, to be prepared in your life. So that's why when we fight for every child. But when we talk about inclusive education, we say here not only children with disabilities, but we talk about children who are from ethnic minorities, children who are also on the street, children who are immigrants, who are refugees. We talk about every child. But when we talk about children with disabilities, it's because those children need a lot of support. And that's why when the law was voted in 2019, we were very vocal. And I have to be very honest and very unfortunate that the academic community was against that. And I have to be very, also clear that although UNICEF has been very open to work with universities and with academia, we have not always been very welcomed because inclusive education, and especially providing access of children with disabilities to education, has been a topic that has not been very well accepted. So this is changing now more and more, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here to talk to you, because it's important you to be also very open, because we as a society, the President talked about the stigma, and I will share with you some of the data that we have when it comes to stigmatizing children with disabilities. Whatever we do as a policies, we usually do analysis, we do studies, we do best examples, and so on. One of the studies that we do is called knowledge, practice, and attitude. It's called CAP study. And what we usually do, we check what is the general public opinion about a particular thing. In 2014, we did a CAP study on the children with disabilities. And at that CAP study, what revealed is that in 2014 was the first one, and after 4 years, in 2018, we did another CAP study on children with disabilities. At that point, only 4% of the general public accepted children with disabilities to be together with other children in the mainstream schools, which is only 4%. At that point of time, if you ask public how many of them would like to have a neighbor who is with disability, it was about 30% of the public. 4 years later, as a result of campaigns that we did, as a result of the capacity building that we did in schools, as a result of being vocal and advocating for children with disabilities, we saw quite an increase in this. It's not a big increase, but it's significant in terms of changing our attitudes. In 2018, we had, as I mentioned, we had 4%. Now the general public, 24% of the general public accepted children with disabilities in regular schools. And also, as a neighbor, it was about 60%. I read a week ago, there was again a study that was published by the Macedonian International Macedonia, I don't know what's the English pronunciation, but they did a study in which you will see that now about 53% of public accept children with disabilities. And what is striking is also that 81% was against people from the LGBT community, and 71% was against people who are refugee and migrants. So this shows the stigma that we have in our society, and how important it is for us to really fight against this stigma. So I talked about the law on primary education, and primary education is an area where we have the biggest achievements, because we have a lot of children being enrolled in primary education. In preschool education, we have more and more children being enrolled. When I think it was 2018, when the minister at that time from the Labor and Social Policy banned the special classes within the kindergartens. Because used to, if you read the law on child protection, was that children with disability who come in kindergarten, they have to be in a separate class, which is, against every right. Then now we have the law on secondary education. It's being developed right now, and UNICEF is again being involved in fighting for children with disability to have full access to secondary education, because it's a mandatory education for everybody. So that is when it comes to legislation. I also want to mention that with our support, we developed a concept for inclusive education. And in this concept of inclusive education, you see the roadmap of how inclusive education should be. The thing is that there is no country that can say we've done everything, we are perfect. Every one of us is, trying something and trying to provide, to change the environment so that children with disability have the right to be together with their peers. So, on a more school level, what we've done on a school level, in 2012, which is 10 years ago, we started modeling inclusive education in schools. We started working with 30 primary schools, 16 kindergartens, and so on. And at that time, you will see that the president talked about motivation. Teachers didn't have motivation to work with children with disabilities. they didn't, and the reason why is because they don't have the capacities, they don't have the resources they need so that they can support the children with disabilities. If we talk about access to primary education, that happened even in 1998, but very small number of children was in schools. So in order to enable this, more and more, we started, first raising awareness, then providing them with different strategies, approaches, so that they can accept children with disabilities in regular and mainstream schools. I also want to mention that in the law on primary education, as of next school year, there will be no more students with disabilities enrolled in special schools. And I think the president also talked about that. No, in the opening speech, I think, of the moderator, she said, the education should be the closest to the child. And the closest to the child is the primary school that in the community that lives. We have we used to have 5 special schools. So for those children who live in rural areas, who are in towns that don't have special schools, those children could not attend school. So that's why it's important that every child is accepted in the community, because we cannot have a different society for one kind of people and different society for the other kind of people. We have to have a society for one. So as part of, as I mentioned, the law, next year everybody will be in mainstream school, and the special schools are now being transformed into resource centers. And the resource centers are the ones who will support inclusive education in schools. Also, what is a novelty, and you probably know that in primary schools we have education assistant who helps the teacher to work with the child with disability. And these educational assistants are part of the resource centers. They are hired by the resource centers, they are monitored, they are supported and trained by the resource centers. What we are doing right now is really building their capacities so that they can be of service to every child in the school. Of course, the educational assistants have been in the schools for a number of years now, and the problems that we are seeing here is that they don't know how to collaborate between themselves, like between teacher and educational assistant, because the teacher thinks that the child with disability is the responsibility of the educational assistant, which is not true. It should be a joint responsibility. They should work together in order to provide the best for the children, for every child, not only for children with disabilities. So that's another area where we have to work. And just recently, we also provided training for all primary schools, for all 364 schools that we have in the country, primary schools. We trained the school inclusive teams. The school inclusive team is comprised of people in the school, which is pedagogues, psychologists, teachers, and their responsibility is all about, caring of having an inclusive environment for everybody. So we did the training, and what we could see that they don't have the capacities to work as a team, and as I mentioned, they think that children with disabilities are the responsibility of the educational assistant. So this has to be changed, and this is an area where we will continue to invest and try to work on. I mentioned that UNICEF is also supporting development of different kind of guidebooks, of different kind of materials. Recently we did the digital materials, and digital materials has to be also inclusive for children who have hearing difficulties, with speech difficulties, and so on. One of the recent application that we did is called Sibel, which is for children who have communication problems. More and more we see that in schools, children are having communication problems. Some children, and communication is not only the language we speak, because some children will never be able to speak. Some children will probably communicate through hands, through gesture. So for them to ease the communication, we the educators in kindergartens, but also teachers, of how they can communicate with children who don't have speech. So that's one of the tools that we have developed. Then we also developed, worked a lot on differentiated learning, which means like to find how every child learns, and based on that, to adopt the approach of learning. Then we also worked on assessment, because the formative assessment is one of the best ways of how to assess children with disabilities. So for us, it's not important only to have the child in the school, but we would like this child to participate. We would like this child to also have good achievements, and we would like this child to be able to have an independent learning, independent living, and be able to find a job and have an independent life tomorrow. So this is something that we have really been fighting for, and trying to work with policymakers, with teachers, with directors, but before all, changing the attitude that we have. Changing the approach that we have, and accepting the difference as a value to our country. Difference is really about having, being valuable, and this is what is the richness of our country. It's not an impediment. I don't know how much time we have, that's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for this interesting speech and productive. I will go to now. We'll go with the next panelist, Sibel, President of the Roma Women's Association.
represented in the fields of education and other fields that are important for them. Before I officially start with my recommendations, I want to point out that as a Roma, I was a lot of time discriminated, first as a Roma, then as a woman, then as an activist, professional, but I don't like to speak as a victim, but I like every time to speak as a fighter, as my father used to taught me. If you want to achieve something, you need to fight for it and prove to the others that they are wrong. So I'm doing that all of the time, and throughout my work as a in the educational process as a teacher, I'm encouraging my students to do the same, to fight, not feel like the victims, but like the fighters, because it feels more encouraging. So, as we all know, discrimination is treating a person badly, unfairly, regarding of their ethnicity, religion, then their nation and everything, so we are all familiar with this. I have some regards and recommendation that I would like to keep in my speech. So I would not speak of the problems because all of us are aware, and maybe some of you also come from the minority group, so up and down we are here. We face the same challenges, discrimination, prejudice, and problems. So I would try to give some positive recommendations. Tackling discrimination is not simply a duty that is laid on the school by the European Convention of Human Rights, but it is also important for the well-being of our students and the educational process like a whole. I think our state should adopt a combination of strong anti-discrimination measures and policies that promote more inclusive education, because we lack of this, where all children will learn together and they will not be segregated. Also, furthermore, I think that if we want to achieve this is not an utopian project, but an achievable goal that can ensure more equal treatment to all children and in long term improve the social cohesion, which is also very important in the educational process. Then schools can also turn to the longer term aspiration of creating a culture of non-discrimination in some of the following areas that I think are important, like challenging stereotypes when they are heard. Then we need to discuss stereotypes with our students from all the ages. Then we need to identify stereotypes in the curriculum and in the process of education. We need to highlight stereotypical images and roles in the textbook, because as a teacher personally, I have faced with many difficult topics, sentences that were against the Roma, and I needed to explain this process, and I was in the middle with my students, so it's really difficult. We need to find a way to fight over this. Then we need to choose different ways of dividing the students when working, and keeping in mind that we have a diversity of ethnicities that we work with. Also, something that is important and is helping me in my work as a teacher is when I want to encourage, especially the children from 7th, 8th, and 9th grade that I have the possibility to work with, I provide them positive role models. Having in mind that I work in general with most of my students that are Roma, I encourage them that they should not stop after their 9th grade and just improve the image of the others that Roma get married early, like when they finish 9th grade, but on the contrary, they need to proceed at least and finish their high schools and be more competitive on the economical market. Then another thing is setting up mechanisms for monitoring incidents of discrimination, which I think is lacking up in our schools. So want to give a chance for the inclusive societies, but keeping in mind if we incorporate them in the educational system, we really need to put struggle, we need really to give our best. And I would finish my speech with a message to all of you. Do not be afraid of the unknown. If you want to introduce with someone, and maybe you have lack of information about him or her, just go to them, have a nice approach, a friendly approach, and maybe speak to them, and then you can conclude, sum up whether that thought, that thinking of them was right or not, and always keep your minds and thoughts open. Thank you.
Now I give a word to our last panelist, Kristina Doda, a program manager from the Institute of Human Rights.
Thank you very much. My name is Kristina Doda, coming from the Institute of Human Rights, at the end, I will have maybe the most easy or the most difficult part to mention and explain the main challenges and issues in the implementation of inclusive education that was not already mentioned by the previous panelists. We, as the Institute of Human Rights, we are working on many issues regarding the human rights protection, especially of marginalized groups. And we have been implementing several programs regarding the right to education of marginalized groups. And as already Vera mentioned, inclusive education is quality education for all. And although the Sustainable Development Goals are defining the inclusive education in a broader sense, historically it's been associated with the right to education of children with disabilities. So in my presentation I will put the emphasis on the right to education of persons with disabilities, and why it is still important to speak about equal right to education of children with disabilities. It is because although we have ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, still 10 years after, we are still struggling with the main principles for implementation. Still, the disability is preserved from the medical and charity point of view, and not from the human rights perspective. Therefore, in the educational field, it is difficult because of lack of knowledge from the side of the schools and the teachers about the real barriers that are not enabling children with disabilities to be actively involved in education. We are still struggling to implement the human rights and the right to education of children with disabilities. It is important to mention that the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities does not give special rights to children with disabilities, but it demonstrates that children with disabilities have the same human rights as all to be included in the same schools, in the same buildings. But as the President already mentioned and Vera already mentioned, this does not mean a simple integration in the same school and in the same classroom, but it means that we must ensure a real participation in order to have quality education for children with disabilities. It was already mentioned that starting from this year, inclusive education is mandatory. We will not have specialized schools anymore. And the law on primary education is aligned with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. However, when we talk about the inclusion of children with disabilities in schools, what the main challenges and also the main principles which are important are ensuring accessibility and ensuring a reasonable accommodation. The first, maybe it's easier to be implemented, and we already started to implement some elements which include not only physical accessibility of buildings, but also accessibility of communication and information, accessibility of curriculum, and accessibility of using the universal design as a minimum standard for ensuring equal access to education of all persons with children with disabilities. But when it comes to reasonable accommodation, we are facing many challenges. Reasonable accommodation means that we should consider the needs case by case for each child with disability. It does not only mean that we should provide physical accommodation, for example, using assistive technology or similar, but we should also provide organizational accommodation, changes in organization of the classroom or similar. For example, for some children with disability, it will be difficult for them to move in one or different classrooms, or in opposite, for some it will be better to be moved in different classrooms. For example, we should use for some children different assistive technology, and there is extensive list of possibilities that each child with disability can request and which should be provided in order to ensure real participation in the education system. I would say that why these concepts, accessibility and reasonable accommodation, are very important is also according to the new law on prevention and protection against discrimination, not enabling and not providing accessibility and reasonable accommodation. It's a form of discrimination. So those are the minimum standards that need to be provided in order to ensure quality education for all children with disabilities. And there is one sentence and maxima that if you provide quality education for persons with disabilities, you can provide quality education for all, including other marginalized groups. So because of that, it's really important to work in building the capacities of schools, because there's lack of knowledge about real understanding of the inclusive education. Usually it's preserved that you need to make the buildings accessible and put the children with disabilities in the same classrooms with others, which is not the case. And if you perceive the inclusive education as such, you make more damage than good. And at the end, I would like to mention, because we as Institute for Human Rights have been working on issue of segregation of Roma children in several municipalities in our country. And we conducted one analysis in 2016, and we have confirmed that in 2 municipalities, Vitol and Stip, there was existing segregation into primary schools. Based on this research, together with the European Roma Rights Center, we have proceeded to court, but unfortunately at that time it was not, our complaint was dismissed as unacceptable, undismissible, because of the then law on protection against discrimination does not allow the acts of Polaris complaint. And I would like to share recent information from yesterday. the European Court of Human Rights have found violation of regarding to Article 14 of the European Convention of Human Rights in connection with Article 2 of Protocol 1, the right to education. And it found that the Romani children's rights were infringed in terms of the access to quality education. I'm glad that Judge and former President of the Constitutional Court is here with us, because also the Constitutional Court had the possibility to examine this case, and although it was rejected by the court, however, the respected judge had a separate opinion, which was in accordance with the European Court of Human Rights judgment. So I'm glad that he's here with us today. Maybe we can discuss on the issue, but we are glad that segregation was recognized as a discrimination, and that the next steps of the government should be in order to ensure equal rights to education of all Roma children living in those two municipalities. I will stop here because we already are out of time, and give more time to
Thank you, Kristina. Thank you very much for your speech. Now let's open the floor for questions and comments from the audience. Anyone? It's Murati.
It's fine, I'll yell. As you said, like, you know, like that's the beauty of like being a teacher, you know, like everybody can hear you no matter where you are in the room. The question that I had is like how to manage it, like how to manage the acceptance of inclusion in a place. So how to manage the acceptance of inclusion in a place where socially we don't do that. Like the reality of our country is that we see people as us and them, no matter which group like people belong to. And to me, like personally, it is the most logical thing because that is my equal, like in terms of like humanity, but then might not be my equal in terms of like values that we might not share or something along those lines. Like, but nobody judges a person by their character; they judge them immediately. Oh, I'm already a woman who speaks a different language, so on and so forth. So, what are some actionable steps that we can take to create a society that genuinely perceives its peers, somebody from the Roma community, or a woman, or like somebody like anybody that looks like different from what is considered the norm, in order for us to truly to be able to create like a society that accepts all. To summarize, actionable steps for an actually inclusive society. How to change the mindset, I guess.
Okay, thank you for the question, marks and everything. Thanks for bringing it out. Well, what can we do is that first, personally, I think that when I don't know something about someone, I don't judge them because I'm taught and raised like that. I think that first, as I previously mentioned out my recommendations, I think that also in our educational system, in order to be inclusive and let's say non-discriminative, if possible, first we need maybe to have some vocational trainings for teachers before they enter the educational process. I personally feel the lack of the teachers that come and work in the multilingual areas with students from different ethnic backgrounds. I think when our educational system has in mind this possibility of, let's say, training the teachers, the next generation of teachers, or maybe the students from the faculties of pedagogy, before they enter the schools and be professionals and teach children, first they need to stop thinking with stigma, with discrimination, with prejudice. They need to be aware of everything that they will encompass, of everything that they will find in their way as an educational professional. Because if you set an example of the children, like being judgmental, being discriminated, then you won't be a role model for the children. You will be someone who will be like a judge, and just you will be pushing the borders and extending the issue with discrimination. So I think this is something that we are lacking of in our educational system. Thank you.
If we have another question, also I would like to just remind you that the former president of the Constitutional Court, you can ask him, if you have questions for him, you can ask him in Turkish or in Macedonian. Anything, please.
Thank you for this great conference and for the great speeches. I have a question specifically for Ms. Vera Mitkovska. Basically, when we speak about the program or the schooling system for people with disabilities and their inclusion in the school, I wanted to have a specific question regarding of the teachers. So, is there any program or any, how can I say, traineeship for those teachers when it comes to their relationship with the people with disabilities? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and it's also complementing what Sibel already said. She said that first we have to have the teachers being ready, starting from their initial education. Even while they're at the faculties, we have to have a program that will prepare them of how they should work with children with disabilities. Unfortunately, there is not a big acceptance and readiness of universities, especially teacher training faculties, of having an inclusive education being part of their study programs. And some of them, what they do is they have a specific subject which is called inclusive education. This is not the solution to that. Inclusive education should be across all subjects. Either you teach pedagogy or methodology or everything, it should be across all subjects. It should not be a subject which is, and usually it's not mandatory subject, it's usually an elective subject for students. So teachers are coming, the future teachers, the students, future teachers are coming to the school and they don't know how to work with children. And then they have to then be provided with professional development in a school, and we do a lot there because, as I mentioned, we have a teacher workforce which is not ready to work with children with disabilities. We have perfect examples of teachers who are really enthusiastic, who can work, they can try everything, because, if you're a parent and you have a child with disability, nobody asks you whether you're prepared. You're going to be prepared by every day you're going to get different strategies of how you're going to support your child. So the teachers are the same. They have to be supported, and what we do, we did, as I said, we modeled first the inclusive education, and then we provided all teachers with a module on inclusive education. And the way how we did it is not really like having a trainer who will have like 30 trainers, and then he has to go and disseminate. We know that dissemination doesn't really work. So what we did, we had the teams that will go in the school there to get a practitioner, special educator, and the Beautiful Development Education Advisor. So these a team will go and will train the entire staff, so that everybody is aware of how they should work. And what is also important is what we don't have it, and we should work more, that we create a peer support. Our teachers, the way they work is like, I enter the classroom, I close the door, is like, you know, go to the class of the other teacher, be together, create this professional learning community where we support each other. Because each one of us will face a different case in the future. And every disability, even if you get a Down syndrome, one child is different from the other child. So it requires a different support. So what is really important that we somehow gather this knowledge and we share this knowledge across the board so that teachers are not only trained, but they have where to access this wealth of knowledge and be able to get what is needed for them. Because today I don't have a child, tomorrow I'm going to have a child with disability in my classroom, and I have to be ready.
Yes,
Hello everyone, thank you for this panel. It's really important for us, especially for... It is really important. Okay, hello everyone, thank you for this panel, and it's really appreciating for having you here, especially we had as well the president and for sure the deputy, which is disrespectful for us living like that while she was prepared of being in a panel like this. This is how I say, because the most important issues about the education regarding to human rights belong to the politics and the big policies that are across the country. But right now we are having such a point to the disabilities. People included with inclusivity in school. My question is, is it right to have in the same class, people with disabilities with the others in the same class and having two teachers or assistant or however you call? Do you think that this violates the right to others? And is it prosperous action or system for others who need having very quality in order to read something? Because we know that our system in the school is not really the top level, quality as well. So what is your opinion about this?
While you're having your microphone, can you just tell me why do you think that a child with disability is better in a special school?
Because, as you already mentioned as well, it is not equal because it's not same.
We are not, none of us is equal. You and I are not equal. You and I are different. And that does not mean that you should be in a different classroom than I should be. So the difference is a richness, is not an impediment. And if you know how to, because I learn different from you or from everybody here in the room. The thing is, if the teacher finds ways and different strategies, every one of us will progress. Everyone.
How many minutes do you have in the class? 45 minutes,
yes.
Right?
So
with the 45 minutes, how you are able to do that and to share the quality of the lessons?
Okay, yes. Let's give the panelists to answer and then we can...
This is my question actually. So I stand for this as well because
okay,
I
good.
think
So
this is
we're on the same page. Yes. It can very well because the thing is that what we have in the education system is so-called inclusive education plan, which means that, first of all, child with disability, it is assessed, it goes through the, I forgot to mention in my previous speech, that we have now not categorization, but we have a so-called commission for assessment of children with disabilities, which is based on the international classification of functionality. This commission looks what the child is able to do, not what is not able, what is their abilities. Based on that, they recommend to the teacher and to the school what kind of reasonable accommodation is needed so that this child can thrive in the classroom. According to the law, there will be no more than 2 children in the classroom of 30 with children with disabilities, which means that, it's manageable. yeah, it's manageable. And also you have an assistant teacher who is helping you to provide the best support to the child. The child, depending on the disability, is not required to, to have the same, goals achieved, the same standards. For some of them, we lower the standards and we try to do what is the best potential that we can get. And you have to know, as I mentioned even before, this child should go together with the students because he lives in the same community, in the same society as everybody else. So it's the right of the child to be in the classroom. And it's the right, there is also services that can help this child to thrive. So there are mechanisms and services that have been provided.
Okay, so here I have one question. So first of all, I want to thank all panelists for their great speeches. It was an honor to host you here, and for the great topics. I will do my question on Macedonia because I want to ask Mr. Salih regarding the topic he talked about. So I will proceed on Macedonia. Hvala prvo na всички што бидете тука и ме пошавте за вашето присуство. Ја имам едно прашање кон бившиот судија господин Салih. Господин Салih Преска, почитуван судија Салih Преска, спомнавте во врска со промената на изборниот модел со цел тоа да се рефлектира во однос на, да кажеме, правичната застапеност и во законодавните и другите органи на турците, особено на турците и другите помали заедници. Во која насока мислите дека треба да се движи изборниот модел и кои би биле предностите во однос на турската етничка заедница, пошто само пред неколку дена го проверив извештајот на Агенцијата за администрација и во колоната 39 од извештајот бројките се запрепастувачки, особено за турската заедница, што на некој начин го потврдува вашата теза, бројките се стварно многу мали и тој принцип на правична застапеност од членот 7 од Уставот и анекси од Орхидскиот рамковен договор на некој начин не се споведува воопшто кога се работи за ова заедница. Благодарам.
Благодарам за прашањето, бидејќи немам можда доволно време да скажем сегменти од проблематиката, но за изборниот закон сега функцијата на Уставот е плурализм. Плурализмот сите што живееме, ние сега треба да се допринесуваме кон демократизацијата на нашата општество. Но за жал се наметнува напор од уставниот концепт, кој Уставот гарантира право на глас и представување, но со законот за изборниот закон сега антиуставно. Фактично ограничува квалитетот и тежината на секој глас. Ние не сме еднакви, јас како поранешен председател на Уставен можем да кажем дека граѓаните од турската заедница во Македонија 30 години не се еднакви во вреднување на нивниот глас. Зошто ќе кажеме? Ние имаме податоци, 65.000 гласачи во турска заедница според пописот се турци. Како ние имаме еден пратеник само во собрание. Податоците покажуваат дека 7.000 до 8.000 гласови треба да се пратени. Сега, монополската положа држава по големите заедници, по големите партии, вие ги знаете моделот, професионалниот модел, сега или, например, како ние ќе искажеме своето богатство во плурализм, кога не ни се дозволува, а друг начин на избор ние немаме. Така, или ќе одиме, например, на една изборна единица, или имаме во окружувањето во Косово, Хрватска, гарантирани места и за нас, за да не бидеме ние дезинтегрирани во политичките процеси. Значи, ние, од 120 пратеници имаме еден пратеник, а 4% сме застапени во држава. Сега, законските можности ни ограничуваат ова право. И тогаш, ако има една изборна единица, предлагаме, имам вака, сега се проблематизира тоа, тогаш ќе се вреднува гласот на сите и можда ние представници од турската заедница сме попатриоти од поголемите заедници, кои ни одзема правото да кажеме нашата визија за просперитет на pluralna Makedonija. До сега фактично ние сме обезправени. Не сакате. От тук, ако отлагаме, се избират и другите, значи, саках ово да кажем денес. Ние, само ова е реченица, дозволите, ние се гордееме дека имаме можда најдобриот устав во регионот, но може би подобро да биде. Значи, не можеме за афирмационални права да зборуваме во Грција, Бугарија или да кажеме во други држави. Ние имаме дека, но една сила надвор од уставот се зема моќ, обезправува безконтролни механизми. Еве што кажете за правична соодветна за статус, но ние една година, значи ние сме на дното. Верувајте во високото судство. Значи има околу 120 души, само јас сум души. Ето, сега, пошто е, тоа шајде одиме на квалитетот. Јас сум пример, сум дипломирал во Бело, сум завршил правен факултет во бивша Југославија. И да немат, например, национална квота, никој ще би ставал судија во Уставни суд. Колко е тагата? Можда ја сум бил добар студент во владен многу јазици, например, 4 јазици во владен. Најслабо во владен својот мајчин јазик, тоа е трудно, тоа е проблемно. Е сега, кога не се може овие права, кај сме тогаш ние прижават во одредба за дека сме еднакви, не сме еднакви. Некој се зема предимствени права. И затоа во застапувањето, да кажеме, 1,8, да се анализира квалитетот на 1,8, тоа е многу трагикомично. Верувајте дека сум имал прилика јас, доктор на науки од турска заедница во бирото за вработување. Тоа е трагедија и докторирал надвор и ово сме предочени на пероничот 50 календари додикувало. А човек еве денеска може да се афирмира многу позната марка е во Македонија, беше 4-5 години во бирото за вработување. А кој треба види седмини доживи човек? Где ги не е вработен? Беше во брат и така натака. Кај се овие, кој ќе одговара за овие дискриминации? Затоа замолувам да има елитни луѓе, да се спроведат правата на другите помали, зашто, знаете, ние сиромашните, кога ќе има нешто, јас денеска така како сиромашен дека, сакам сега да изложам на моите гости да се запознат, например, со моето богатство. Затоа идејат малце, да кажем, пошироко, бидејќи немам кај да искажам. Дека умите се блокирани за нас, младите заедници. Еве, отворено кажеме, во кој медиум ќе се проблематизира проблем на турците, преска борба со цената дама, дека замислите, после пето одделение, во Источна Македонија на турците се овозможува да учат на друг јазик. Ја не кажувам дека треба да го владеат македонските јазик. Најпрво треба да го владеат. Но замислите, 6-тото одделение почнува скоро на друг јазик. И трагедијата и успехот на този проект. И доаѓаме до проблемот, во Гостиварско, мината година во Гостивар имаме проблем, со отварање паралелка, затварање паралелка на турскиот наставен јазик, бидејќи државата има подобри случаи за својки права, има работено, сигурно. Доаѓаме до состојба, дека, за да се види има еден лимит, да кажеме 40%. А ние сме од 38 до 37, од Источна Македонија. Во Источна Македонија никаде немаме ни гимназија на турски јазик, доаѓа до Гостивар. Сега не можеш со исти критериум да отвараш паралелка како за поголеми заедници и за помали заедници. Европската конвенција за локални и регионални јазици и за недискриминација овој патува. Државата кажува, не можеш исти критериум 20 души да побараш. За мене кога јас го пример да кажеме во Штип имам 15 деца. Што да прават 15 деца? Значи, тука треба да се афирмираат овие слободи и права. Затоа повикувам макар вие сте луѓе кои работите на аналитика на овие проблеми да се пишува, зашто ништо Македонија нема да изгледа. Македонија е се воздигна. Јас отворено кажам, јас сум првиот турчин во светот надвор од Турција кој сум станал судија во Уставни суд. Првиот турчин сум кој сум станал председател на Уставни суд. И ова не е гордост на мојата трговина. Јас кажав на моите нашите, која ќе одите, афирмирајте ова. Дека да во други држави ова нема. Еве, вчера во бирото за застапување на Република Македонија, Sibel тук. Имаме пресуда на работа по-уредно на член 14 от Конвенцията за сегрегация на ромските деца в Титова, а аз имам издвоено мислене. Потвърдена цялото мое издвоено мислене. И аз на брилянтен начин, тогава застъпвам тезата, по Уставен суд Кемите 138 предмет 2019, съм напишал около 20 страници и проблематизирам. Уместо ние да увидиме проблемот во 2018, ние сме сега осудени пострадани. Защото се гради, сегрегация се върши на тезата под ромската заедница во Бajram. И затоа ние правниците треба да сме Рома. Това е нашата основна да афирмираме кој ќе става. И аз, например, сум пресреќен денеска дека сум ова да споделим, што не се однесува како студија, дека сега со униките да се снимна малце и за задачата со кој става. Можда на овај препорака до професорите по-често да се организираат вакви конференции, може да бидат и други стручности, така да се богати за проблем.
Unfortunately, we need to close up the panel, but it's really too late. It's too late, please. So I would like to say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for sharing with us your work in relation to the human rights, especially to the right to education, and of course your thoughts with the focus on the right to inclusive education. In the end, I would like to deliver to you the certificates of appreciation and also gifts. Don't worry, I can't forget the students, don't worry. Okay. I will say a couple of things. I will start with one quote. It is one quote from one education activist from Pakistan. Her name is Malala. Her surname, for me, is impossible to pronounce it. She said that one pen. One pen, one child, one teacher can change the world. At IBU, we strongly believe in this quote. We believe that our students are our presence, that our students are our future. I can say that we know that they can and they will change the world. What we teach them, what we educate them, is to be able to overcome every obstacle they face in their lives, to be able to create solutions for every challenge that they're going to have. Therefore, we organized a student competition for our students, dedicated to the right to inclusive education and to the quality of education. Our students were very active in this process. Some of them have expressed their ideas through making presentations, to making posters, to writing essays, and the best way to conclude this great event today is to award them with certificates of appreciation. I would like to congratulate all of you for your great work, for the great work you have done, and I encourage you to keep up with your good work, and of course, especially in the field of protection of the human rights. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to name my name. I'm going to call the students. You can come on stage to receive your certificate. Zeynep Kamber. Erwin Yilmaz.
Alihan Dursun. Esin Elmali. Not here. Okay. Anıl Coşkun. Murat Bekiroğlu. Murat.
It's done? Okay. We're closing up. Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your attention. See you.
Dear students, the ones who participate for the parliament simulation, please stay here. We will have like 20 minutes of activities, but you can have break if you would like 5 minutes. Okay? But for the parliament simulation, come back, okay?